The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Sterling International's 42nd floor. At 11:30 on a Tuesday night, the executive offices should have been empty, but voices drifted from the conference room at the end of the corridor. Marcus slowed his pace, not wanting to interrupt whatever late-night meeting was taking place. Through the glass walls, he could see 5 people hunched over a large table, their faces illuminated by the glow of laptops and documents scattered across the polished surface. Victoria Sterling herself sat at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back in its characteristic bun, even at this late hour. The billionaire CEO rarely stayed this late unless something extraordinary was happening. Before we dive deeper into Marcus's story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar overlooked talents in your own workplace. Marcus had been cleaning these floors for 3 years now, invisible to most who walked these halls during daylight hours. But tonight felt different. The urgency in the room was palpable, and he found himself pausing near the conference room door, adjusting his cart more slowly than necessary. One of the executives, a man Marcus recognized as the head of international acquisitions, was gesturing frantically at what appeared to be an ancient document displayed on the large screen. The artifact looked weathered, covered in symbols that seemed to dance in the projection light. Marcus felt something stir deep in his chest, a familiar sensation he hadn't experienced in years. They laughed when she missed, until the range officer said, "Look at the back wall, too." 200 recruits stopped cold on the obstacle course, until the janitor cleared the wall, blindfolded 3. SEALs cornered in an ambush called for backup. Then a single shot came from a hidden ridge 4. They thought she was only the medic, until the captain handed her his Barrett and said, "Take the shot, 5. They sent fighter jets after the Apache pilot, then heard her laugh before their planes went down 6. The SEAL team's desperate call rang out, until a master sniper answered from the shadows 7. The SEAL said no air support was coming. Then an A-10 broke radio silence 8. They said she was too young, until she hit a target at 4,100 meters 9. 6 rich kids attacked 3 girls in the woods. 45 seconds later, they learned the cafe owner's past 10. They bet $1 million she would miss, so she did it blindfolded 11. The medic they overlooked, until a Taliban ambush revealed her at 10 past 12. The sniper missed his mark, so she took it from 2 miles farther. Richard Blackwood arrived at Sterling International each morning with the swagger of a man determined to prove his worth through the diminishment of others. As senior manager of operations, he wielded his authority like a weapon, particularly against those he deemed beneath his station. Marcus had learned to time his cleaning routes to avoid Richard's morning inspections, but sometimes encounters were inevitable. Yesterday, Richard had cornered Maria, the day shift cleaner, berating her accent while she tried to explain why the supply closet needed restocking. "You people need to learn proper English if you want to work here," Richard had sneered, his voice carrying across the open office space where other employees pretended not to notice. Marcus had watched from the break room doorway as Maria's face flushed with embarrassment. She held a master's degree in education from Columbia, but cleaned offices to support her elderly parents. Richard, of course, knew nothing of her background, seeing only what fit his narrow worldview. The pattern repeated itself weekly. Richard would find fault with the cleaning staff's work, question their intelligence, and make jokes about their education levels to anyone who would listen. He seemed to take particular pleasure in these displays when other managers were present, as if putting others down somehow elevated his own status. Marcus had developed a strategy of quiet dignity in response. He completed his work efficiently, kept his interactions brief and professional, and never gave Richard ammunition for his cruelty. But inside, Marcus felt the familiar burn of injustice that reminded him why he had once dedicated his career to preserving the voices of ancient civilizations that others had tried to silence. The manuscript had arrived 3 weeks ago, sealed in a climate-controlled case and accompanied by a team of armed security guards. Victoria Sterling had acquired it through a private auction, part of a collection discovered in a recently excavated Mesopotamian site. The document was rumored to be a contract of immense historical significance, potentially worth hundreds of millions in cultural partnerships with Middle Eastern governments. But the ancient text remained stubbornly silent. Dr. Harrison Webb from Harvard had spent 5 days hunched over the document, his reputation as a leading Sumerian expert preceding him. He had left frustrated, admitting the dialect was unlike anything in the standard academic texts. Dr. Patricia Reyes from Oxford had followed, then Professor Klaus Mueller from the University of Berlin. Each had departed with apologies and recommendations for other specialists. The pressure was mounting. Sterling International had committed to a massive archaeological preservation project contingent on successfully translating this specific document. The Iraqi Ministry of Culture was waiting for confirmation that the text contained the historical precedent they needed to move forward. Billions of dollars in cultural tourism infrastructure hung in the balance. Victoria Sterling paced the conference room nightly now, her usual composure showing cracks. The board of directors was asking pointed questions about the wisdom of banking an entire venture on a single piece of ancient parchment. International competitors were circling, hoping Sterling International would fail to meet the deadline. Time was running out, and the symbols on the weathered manuscript continued to guard their secrets, as if they were waiting for exactly the right person to unlock their meaning. Marcus couldn't shake the image of those symbols from his mind. As he cleaned the conference room the following evening, his eyes kept drifting to the projection screen where the manuscript remained displayed. The cleaning spray in his hand grew forgotten as recognition sparked in his memory. Those weren't standard Sumerian characters. The script showed influences of Old Akkadian mixed with ceremonial Babylonian, a hybrid writing system that had been used for exactly one type of document in ancient Mesopotamia. Sacred contracts between temple authorities and foreign dignitaries. Marcus had written his doctoral dissertation on this precise linguistic phenomenon. He moved closer to the screen, his trained eye catching nuances that the visiting scholars had likely missed. The third symbol in the second line wasn't a standard cuneiform character at all, but a rare ceremonial variant used only in documents of the highest religious significance. Dr. Webb and the others would have interpreted it incorrectly using standard translation matrices. That night, Marcus returned home to find Emma struggling with her bedtime routine. "Papa, will you tell me a story?" she asked, climbing into her small bed. Marcus sat beside her, smoothing her dark hair away from her face. "What kind of story tonight, little one?" he asked softly. "Tell me about the smart people from long ago," she said, "the ones who wrote on rocks." As Marcus began weaving a tale about ancient scribes and their sacred writings, Emma interrupted him mid-sentence. "Papa, why don't you use your professor voice anymore? You always sound different when you tell these stories." The question pierced something deep in Marcus's chest, a reminder of the life he had set aside. The humiliation came on a Thursday morning when Marcus arrived early to finish the conference room before the day's shift began. Richard Blackwood appeared unexpectedly, clearly agitated about something, his usual smugness replaced by barely controlled frustration. Well, Richard announced loudly as other early employees began filtering into the office space. "Look who thinks he belongs in the executive conference room." Marcus continued his work methodically, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces. He had learned that engaging with Richard only escalated these situations. "You know what I heard?" Richard continued, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. "I heard some of you cleaning people think you're smarter than the rest of us. Think you understand business better than people with actual educations." Several office workers had stopped their morning routines, some looking uncomfortable, others watching with the morbid fascination of people witnessing a car accident. Richard stepped closer to Marcus, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tell me, Janitor, what do you think about all those fancy professors who can't figure out that old piece of paper in there?" He gestured toward the conference room. "Maybe we should ask the cleaning crew for their expert opinions." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'm just here to do my job, sir," he said quietly. "Just here to do your job." Richard repeated mockingly. How refreshing. Someone who knows their place. Unlike some people who think a mop and bucket qualify them to comment on ancient history. The cruelty in Richard's voice was unmistakable, designed to strip away dignity in front of an audience. Later that evening, Marcus found himself alone in the conference room, the manuscript still glowing on the projection screen. He had intended to simply clean and leave, but something drew him closer to the ancient text. His fingers traced patterns in the air, following the flow of symbols that had frustrated so many experts. Richard's footsteps echoed down the hallway before his voice cut through the silence. Still here, Janitor Richard entered the room with the swagger of a man enjoying his own performance. I see you staring at that old paper again. What is it about educated people's failures that fascinates you so much? Marcus straightened, cloth still in hand. I should finish cleaning and get out of your way, he said quietly. Oh no, Richard stepped between Marcus and the door, a cruel smile spreading across his face. I'm curious now. You seem awfully interested in something that's way above your pay grade. Tell me, what do you see when you look at those chicken scratches? Marcus remained silent, but Richard wasn't finished. The project manager's eyes lit up with malicious inspiration. You know what I heard? Richard continued, his voice growing louder. I heard that document is worth hundreds of millions to whoever can translate it. Harvard professors, Oxford scholars, all the smartest people in the world have tried and failed. Richard moved closer to the screen, gesturing dramatically at the ancient symbols. Here's an idea, he announced with theatrical flair. Why don't you take a shot at it, translate this, and I'll make you rich. Hell, I'll recommend you for a promotion to Victoria, Sterling herself. The mockery in his voice was unmistakable, designed to humiliate rather than genuinely challenge. Marcus set down his cleaning cloth and walked slowly toward the projection screen. Something in his movement made Richard's smirk falter slightly. The janitor's posture had changed, his shoulders straightening as he approached the ancient text with the reverence of someone who understood its true significance. For a long moment, Marcus studied the manuscript in silence. His eyes moved across the symbols with practiced precision, following patterns that had eluded some of the world's most renowned scholars. Richard shifted uncomfortably behind him, the silence stretching longer than expected. This isn't standard Sumerian, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a different quality now. It's a hybrid script, old Akkadian ceremonial forms merged with sacred Babylonian variants, only used for the most important religious contracts between temple authorities and foreign dignitaries. Richard's mouth opened slightly. What did you just say? Marcus pointed to specific symbols on the screen. This character here that your experts probably interpreted as a standard ownership marker, it's actually a ceremonial variant, meaning divine witness. And this sequence refers not to property transfer, but to sacred obligations between peoples. The cleaning uniform seemed to fall away as Marcus spoke, replaced by something else entirely. His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years studying these exact linguistic patterns. Richard took an involuntary step backward as he watched the transformation taking place before his eyes. Other employees had begun gathering in the hallway, drawn by voices from the conference room. Word was spreading quickly through the building that something extraordinary was happening on the executive floor. Marcus stepped closer to the screen and began to speak in a language that hadn't been heard in these halls for 3,000 years. The ancient Sumerian words flowed from his lips with natural fluency, each syllable pronounced with the precision of someone who had spent decades studying the phonetic evolution of dead languages. Richard stumbled backward, his face pale. The gathering crowd in the hallway pressed closer to the glass walls, watching in stunned silence as the janitor continued his recitation of the ancient text. It says, Marcus began in English, his voice carrying the cadence of a professor addressing a lecture hall, by the authority of Marduk, and under witness of the temple of Asagila. Let this covenant be established between the children of the two rivers and the people of the distant mountains. He paused, pointing to a complex cluster of symbols. This section details the terms of a sacred partnership for the preservation of knowledge. The temple agrees to protect and maintain the written wisdom of a foreign civilization in exchange for access to their astronomical observations and mathematical innovations. More employees had abandoned their workstations, drawn by whispered reports of the impossible scene unfolding in the conference room. Security guards had arrived, but stood transfixed as Marcus continued his translation. The document concludes with provisions for the education of scribes from both cultures. Marcus explained, his finger tracing the final lines of text. It's not a property contract at all. It's a cultural exchange agreement, one of the earliest examples of international academic cooperation in recorded history. Richard's mouth moved soundlessly, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Richard stood frozen, his jaw slack, staring at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. The man he had mocked and humiliated for years had just accomplished what Harvard professors and Oxford scholars could not. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to the screen, his academic instincts fully awakened now. Furthermore, he continued, his voice gaining strength. The papyrus itself shows signs of having been created using a reed preparation technique that was only practiced in the temple workshops of Babylon during a very specific 30-year period. The carbon dating your experts likely performed would place this document at approximately 2100 BCE, making it one of the oldest examples of diplomatic correspondence ever discovered. He pointed to subtle markings along the document's edges. These seal impressions here indicate the involvement of at least 3 different scribal schools, suggesting this wasn't just an agreement between 2 parties, but a multilateral cultural compact. The implications for understanding ancient Mesopotamian international relations are extraordinary. Richard's face had gone through several shades of pale. His hands trembled slightly as the magnitude of what he was witnessing began to sink in. The man he had called uneducated, the janitor he had dismissed as beneath contempt, possessed knowledge that surpassed some of the world's leading academics. The crowd outside had grown to include nearly everyone still in the building. Phones were being pulled out, recording what was clearly a historic moment. Word was spreading through text messages and social media that something incredible was happening at Sterling International. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Victoria Sterling stepped onto the 42nd floor. The billionaire CEO had been working late in her penthouse office when her assistant called with urgent news about a commotion in the conference room. She had expected to find Richard Blackwood dealing with some minor security issue. Instead, she discovered half her night staff crowded around the glass walls, their faces pressed against the windows in rapt attention. Victoria pushed through the crowd, her sharp eyes immediately taking in the scene before her. Marcus stood at the projection screen, his cleaning uniform somehow transformed into something that looked almost professorial. Richard cowered in the corner, his usual arrogance replaced by shell-shocked bewilderment. And on the screen, the manuscript that had frustrated millions of dollars worth of expert consultation was finally yielding its secrets. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Everyone stepped aside immediately, creating a path to the conference room door. As she entered, Marcus turned toward her, and Victoria saw something in his eyes that she recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who belonged in academic circles, someone who understood the weight of historical significance. This was not the expression of a janitor who had stumbled onto something by accident. "You're telling me," Victoria said slowly, her gaze moving between Marcus and the screen, "that you've translated the document that has stumped some of the world's leading experts." Marcus nodded quietly. "Dr. Marcus Chun," he said, extending his hand with quiet dignity. "Former professor of ancient languages and Mesopotamian studies at Columbia University." Victoria Sterling studied Marcus with the sharp intelligence that had built her empire. "Dr. Chun," she said, her voice carrying new respect, "I've been searching for someone with your exact expertise for months. The Iraqi Ministry of Culture has been waiting for authentication of this document to finalize our archaeological preservation partnership." She turned to Richard, whose face had gone ashen. "Mr. Blackwood, I believe you have some explaining to do about how you've been treating our most valuable asset." Richard stammered incoherently, but Victoria had already dismissed him from her attention. "Security will escort you out," she said simply. "Your employment here is terminated immediately." "Marcus," she continued, turning back to him with genuine admiration, "I'm offering you the position of Director of Cultural Affairs. Your expertise could save our entire Middle Eastern expansion project." 3 months later, Marcus walked through the same hallways where he had once pushed a cleaning cart. His office overlooked the city, filled with books and artifacts that reminded him daily of his restored purpose. Emma visited him every day after school, her proud smile brighter than any academic award he had ever received. The Cultural Preservation Project had not only succeeded, but had become a model for international cooperation. Marcus's translation had opened doors to partnerships across the archaeological world, exactly as the ancient scribes had intended when they created their covenant of shared knowledge. If this story of hidden talents and second chances touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or if you've ever discovered unexpected abilities in someone you initially overlooked. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight.